Good evening. I will call the Wednesday, March 11th, 2026 school committee meeting to order. All members are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have two presentations this evening. The first is to recognize two award winners from our school department. We have Bryn Wilkinson and Shaylee Kennedy, who were both awarded part of the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards this year. If you're able to come down, we can present a couple of awards for you. And if you'd also like to say a few words about your works of art, which you can see are on screen here on both sides. Thank you. It's great to be able to celebrate artists right now in Biddeford. You're doing an incredible job, and we're really proud of the efforts, the time, talent, and your skill set. And please keep sharing that gift with us. Our next presentation is for former school committee members, current city councilor Lisa Vadnais, current planning board member John McCurry, and also Chad Bars. Turn it over to the superintendent.
Oh, I think we got one more student coming in right now. I think if we backtrack just a
We'll go back.
second.
Come on down.
Come on down, Shaylee. We are recognizing your art achievement. So Shaylee won honorable mention at the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards for her piece, Chromatic Shades of Me. Congratulations, Shaylee.
Great, that was nice job. Nice job.
Chad is not here, but we have the opportunity to have Lisa and John McCurry here tonight, and would just like to recognize them for their time on the school committee. So first, I'd like to talk about John for a second. So I've known John since I've been here 14 years ago, and definitely have a budding friendship over those 14 years, because the first 2 years, I'm not sure that John and I would have gone out to lunch immediately, because we had some zip code problems. But John, over time, we built a great friendship. And whether it was from watching Kiara grow up and being at everything, and whether it was John always tells the story at the Acton Fair, Kiara running up and giving me a hug, and my wife Suzanne there kind of like probably wondering like, who's this kid? To being able to see Kiara walk across the stage last year as a senior, because she was a kindergartner when I came on board. John's been a great partner to bounce ideas off from, great support on the city council. We all know John as a fiscal conservative, but John also, both of these members, John was always the first one when the funding formula was a little bit different with the Center of Technology to give me a call before a final budget meeting and say, so you're telling me if we add $300,000 for renovations at the COT, we're going to get that money back in the following year? And it was yes. And a lot of the first level of renovations at the COT are directly because of those moves at budget committee that John would make and for his support over there. John's just dedicated so much time to this community, and I just want to thank John for that. Next, I'd like to go on to Lisa, who was around on the first hiring committees from day one. And Lisa has been on the board for, was on the board for all 14 years that I was here, plus I think 2 more other than that prior to that. And again, another situation where her son was probably like a 2nd grader, I think, at the time. And then watching Cole go through and have really find his niche at the vocational center and welding course. Lisa was there through all of the tough budget battles at the beginning. Very important. Karen was on the board, and back now through the Waterhouse piece. That was like a big struggle for us. I remember the meeting that Lisa and I had where we really wanted to have a culinary program on the first floor of the vocational center, and we were trying to figure out how that would happen. And at that time, to renovate just the first floor, we were looking at $2 million, and we were like, we can never do this. And then look at what we have today. And I think one of the things that people sometimes fail to recognize is consistency, and having people who have served on boards for a long time that can bring the historical knowledge back to the board as you make decisions. So I have, we've changed up the gifts just a little bit. And so first, for John and Lisa, we hope that you will enjoy your new coolers that are branded with the Biddeford School Department, and they're on wheels so that you can drag things around. And instead of the chair that sits in your house, we want you to spend some time outdoors. And I know, John, you like to go camping, and Lisa, being outdoors, when you finally tell me you're moving up in the woods, like you've said so many times before, you can take this with you that's branded with a couple of nice cup holders. Looks like there's one for a cell phone, but we know that won't be you, Lisa, that will have the cell phone there. And so we'd like to present those to you. But additionally, Lisa, we have a photo to present to you. And after 16 years of service on a board, coming up with the appropriate gift sometimes is a little bit hard. And so we kind of thought about if there was one thing throughout, I think, our time together, we were always in lockstep around our support for vocational education. And so we have those lovely stone benches out there, and we were able to talk. You have to talk to the cemetery guy to get this done, which is a little bit weird because they make the gravestones, but they're going to be able to come over this summer and take the bench top in recognition of Lisa Vadnais, school committee member 2009 through 2025, supporting skills, trades, education. And so that will be out there on our bench. So if you guys could please come down, I'd love to recognize you guys. You can fold up nice and easy. There you go. I will fold these chairs for you. And I know you guys will want to have a picture, and I know Lisa will want to go with the microphone. Right?
You. Okay, I think unexpected. So I'm a little bit shaken here, but I will say this. He's right. We had one thing kind of in common, and that was COT. There were some things that we swayed that we didn't have in common, and he was always very gracious with my unprofessional manner of expressing what I didn't like. And I must say, this was a really tough decision for me, but I sometimes feel that you can overstay in a position and become stagnant on what you want. And it's always good to kind of recognize that, even though you love what you're doing. Now I'm going to switch over and love what I'm doing on City Council. We have a great mayor, and we're moving forward with a lot of great things, so I know that's going to happen. But this decision to leave this school board was a big part of my life. This was, I was 5 years at CDS and 30 years in public education and 16 years up here. And all my life revolved around talking about schools and school problems. Now we don't talk about that anymore. I'm leaving that all to you. But it was a hard thing to do, And my last meeting here, I grabbed my nameplate and walked out, driving home like I didn't understand that really happened and I wasn't coming back. And did I really do a good job? And did I really give Jeremy a hard enough time? Like all of these questions were going through my mind. And about 2 days after that meeting, I started to get messages from people, which really took me back, telling me, thanking me for my service. I had a visit on that Sunday from somebody with a bouquet of flowers and a card thanking me for my service. And I was like, we don't do it for that. We don't do it for recognition. And if you are, you're doing the wrong thing. I mean, it's really not about the $10 that you get. It's not about the recognition. It's not about the power in it. It's about really caring to make a difference for the better. And I hope I'm bringing that to the city council, sadly leaving the school in, I think, good hands. I mean, I've only watched one meeting, but I think, some of you I know, some of you I don't, but it's a labor of love. And I wish you the best of luck, and know that when you're making decisions, you're making them not just for students, you're making them for staff, you're making them for people that run the school buildings, and making policies that are going to stand for a long period of time. So you really want to do a good job in what you're doing. And I think you all will. And I thank you so much. Jeremy took me by surprise. This is just, and I think he did it on purpose. I don't get emotional like this very often, but that is very special for me. And I thank you for that. John, do you want to say something? Are you sure? Are you sure? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. I'll miss all of that too, but thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
A tough act to follow. That'll take us to adjustments to the agenda, of which there are none. On to item F, approval of last meeting's minutes. Those are the minutes from February 25th, 2026.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Marie, second by Amy. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. On to the consent agenda, which we have athletic stipends, and we have appointments. Naomi Pelletier for a transportation bus driver, resignations, Caitlin Berry for an Ed Tech 2, Lauren Ween for a Biddeford High School resource teacher, Christopher Giordano for a BIS behavioral ed tech, and transfers Stacy Hand, BIS special education, moving to BPS IEP coordinator.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Takes us to the superintendent's report.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, or early evening, wherever we're at. It's still light out, so it seems like afternoon. I do think I love daylight savings time in the spring because it just changes everything about your mood, your attitude, and moving forward. So, I don't have a ton of things to report tonight, but I just want to go through a few. First is we've been spending most of our time on budget the last few weeks, and we're going to get to that piece. I just want to just publicly say that Colin, who is our new business manager, has been fantastic trying to move from a system that wasn't working to quickly making the decision on like day 2 is we're just going to work off the spreadsheet and we're going to figure it out. And you know, when you have a spreadsheet that's got like 10,000 lines on it, that can be a few too many. But great job, and thank him for that. We've also, as you've seen on the news, been spending a great deal of time really pulling data and being focused on LD 22-26, which I really feel has a lot of momentum right now to pass, which would be a great step in the right direction for the Biddeford taxpayers and the students. I think there's a lot of momentum, and we'll talk more about that. I was able to talk last time and fit it in about our culinary students who won the wonderful second place in the cooking and third in the hospitality program. And next meeting, Paulette will be here to talk a little bit about all of the programs at the vocational school. I want to say a big congratulations to our boys co-op ice hockey team for winning the Class B state championships in a 3-2 game. The team included Biddeford, Old Orchard Beach, and York. So great job to them. It's never too early to register for pre-K or kindergarten. So if you're at home and you hear this, or if you know people, please start thinking about that. It's important to remember that pre-K is for 4-year-olds. And you actually, if you're one of those people who want to hold your kiddo back, you don't qualify because it's a 4-year-old program. And then K is for 5, and that cutoff date is October 15th. So it's as long as you're 4 by or 5 by those dates. Just a reminder that Mean Girls, the drama club production is March 19th, 20th, and 21st. And on March 22nd at 1, we have our marching arts show here in the gym. Thank you.
Any questions for the superintendent? Megan?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment about LD 22-26. I know we're going to talk a lot about it. I haven't been on the board a long time, but when you first started talking about trying to change this, I thought this was never going to happen while I served on this board. And I agree with you. This is gaining a lot of momentum, and now I firmly believe this is something we're going to see soon. And I think that's really been on your back, you know, and so I was talking about it at a staff meeting at another school today, and I still can't believe that it's, you know, almost becoming a reality, considering how far-fetched this was a long time, you know, not very long ago at all. And so I just want to say, I know you just testified this week, and it's just a lot of work that you've put into making something nobody wanted to talk about almost a reality. So
Thank you. Student representative reports, starting with Cordelia Kane.
So, since we last met, the winter sports season came to an end, and I just want to congratulate the boys hockey team again. I was at the game, and it was really fun to watch, and it was really good to see the Biddeford and York boys play well together on the ice, but also see the students in the fan section all together from both Biddeford and York. And then last night, we had our winter sports banquet where 18 seniors were named all-academic, and 17 athletes were named to an all-state or all-conference team. Since the winter season is coming to an end, spring sports are getting ready to start in a few weeks. Teams have started doing meetings to prepare for the season. If you have interest in joining a spring sport, reach out to the coach and sign up on Family ID. Our COT students will have their National Technical Honor Society induction on the 26th. And in the high school, National Honor Society forms were sent out to qualifying sophomores and juniors and were due last Friday. And we're going to begin reviewing for induction in May. This week in Make It Count March, BHS Interact and Sustainability Club have teamed up to do a bake sale fundraising money for a Rotary International project, as well as running bottle collection to raise money for the clubs.
Thank you. Marcus Perkins.
During the first week of March, our Be the Change team made care packages for the homeless with donations from all grades. The Mean Girls performance is happening 19th, 20th, and 2 shows on the 21st. I'd also like to say it was very funny when I came in this morning. I saw Sarah Warner with a blonde wig on, and that just made my day. And then when I made my way down the hall to go to my first class, I saw my advisory teacher also wearing a blonde wig and a Mean Girl shirt, which was just awesome. I'd like to congratulate the Blizzard Winds, Blackout Percussion, and Blaze Color Guard for all coming in first at their NESBA show. NESBA show. And they're having an MBDA finals here the 22nd at 1.
Thank you. Any questions for our student representatives? Thank you. That takes us to committee reports. Michelle?
Nothing to update on policy committee, except that you will notice we're doing the second reading of BIC and BIC-E. So I just want to remind you all that we have 120 days to complete that training, and that's coming up the end of March. And that's the school committee freedom of access training. So it's linked in the BIC.
Thank you. Marie?
We met with the negotiations team from the EdTech 1, 2, 3, and administrative assistants. They had a workshop on Monday, and we'll be meeting again on the 23rd. So that continues to move forward. This Friday, the negotiations team will also be meeting with the bus drivers. So we're rolling forward and looking forward to their completion.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, that will take us to new business budget presentation. Superintendent Ray.
All right, so thank you. We're at the beginning stages of our budget, and I feel like I'm so far behind this year, but really, I gave this presentation last year on March 5th, so we're not that far behind and all that. Again, a little bit different of a process this year. We built the budget last year using the old computer system, and this was using a new software system that certainly has given us some glitches throughout the budget building process, especially around transportation. That was been our hardest part because it just kept pulling in anytime it was asking for a field trip, it was pulling in all of these salaries. And so we've had to do a lot of work on that pieces. So just wanted to start off the first couple of slides and just kind of, look at some of the, cool things or bright spots, and it's hard to put those into a couple of slides that happen in our schools. But, really on this year, if you think about the primary school and all of the great things that are going on, we have quite a big construction project there. And I'm very excited that hopefully once this, we kind of through the snow, and I was over there today and we're fighting a lot of mud over there, that walking through the building, the second floor is almost fully done. And it's really nice. It's really nice in there. The work that was done, and I don't even know if you were over there last week, but they've started to install the hallway lights that are very, very impressive, just the way it's coming out. And I think this is going to be a great addition for us. When you look at, our intermediate school, and you think of all the great things coming on, just, thanking Lindsay for just how seamless she was able to incorporate the move of pre-K over there so that we could last year during a tough budget season, you know, close that building fully and not operate out of it. And, you know, her and the staff over there and the pre-K staff just done a remarkable job. When we look at our middle school, I, you know, just think that, you know, being named an outstanding chapter of Best Buddies and that program that they done there just shows the testament of our kids and the caring that happens there. And then Scotty's willingness always to host Wreaths Across America when they come to town. That's always a fun day. When we think about our high school, we think about the arts and our you know, our bands and our sports and our music and all the offerings we have for our kiddos. We were able to honor some kids just this evening for their excellence in arts. And then, you know, just what they give to the community, whether when they're helping out for the Thanksgiving stuff, it's really a great piece. Also, pretty exciting around the high school piece is knowing that we're going to have a new home for APC is really important with all the great work that they do over there and how we pull that in. The Center of Technology, just all of the great work they've done with whether it's the recent competitions, and they'll be going to Skills USA, and the fact that, you know, for many years we had a goal of offering, well, the goal was 400, just to get 400 courses over there a year. And then we eclipsed that piece, and we're at 512 courses this year being taken for CTE programming. That was something that I didn't think that we would ever get to, and knowing that we have 2 new programs coming next year, you know, 550s in our sights. And so that's exciting. And then also honoring the great work that our adult education staff does, especially around the family literacy program, the courses for ELL families and other certification programs. As we start to talk about the budget every year, and you know, I'm gonna hand this section off to Megan because she's learned so much about valuation over the last couple of years. She can give this one to us. But really, when you look at where we are, valuation's the big piece, and that's the piece that we've been fighting kind of with LD 2226, is that everything isn't about property values. It's also community wealth. And in this situation, our property values continue to rise, but not this year. We are just a little bit under state level, and we're going to be under state level against next year. One of the things that the trends, and if you really want to read up on state valuations, you can click on the table and see what everything's going to happen locally this year and what the 3-year averages will be everywhere across the state. And what I tend to see happening is that while property values are still rising way too much, Southern Maine's starting to not be so far ahead of the curve. That curve is starting to fall to other places, specifically if you look at Oxford and Franklin, Kennebec County. And I think a lot of that's about, maybe this house market down here is kind of maxed a little bit of what you can pay to get into a home versus there's still some room for growth in some of those others. But when you look at it from a valuation standpoint, we're going to be staying under that state average, which is really important for us. The next piece that, I really want to talk about is many times people looking at what we spend per student, and using the current figures. In 2 parts come out of this that come up, and why this number is where it's at is vocational education column comes out because all of that money comes directly from the state for that, and it's not really a per pupil expense of ours because we're hosting students from all other communities. So if you want to compare apples to apples, a lot of places don't have a vocational center. So they're not getting that big sum of money thrown into that line by the state, and it's not a true expenditure. And then taking out debt service, because if you have a school construction project, the state's also giving you that money and it goes on your debt service. So if you're looking at true academic expenses of what you're paying and compare those with others in the state, you'll see that in this region, we spend near the bottom of schools. That's kind of a fact, and that's part of the piece that we look at with our testimony at the state and LD 2226 is that schools that have a higher concentration of poverty throughout the state tend to spend a lot less, and that the gap of a place like York that is at 27,000 to a place like Machias, which is at $12,081. I mean, $14,000-15,000 spread there. And so that's part of the work that we're doing, is about how are ways that, again, zip code shouldn't be what drives your educational experience in that work. The next slide that I have for you is just learning a little bit more about LD 2226, because the piece that I'm going to be asking from all of you is that once hopefully this gets passed to a floor vote through the work session, that's when the support is really going to be needed of reaching out to your representatives. And it's not about just the representatives in our community. Our representatives in the community know what it's going to do for us. It's reaching out to anyone that you may know in another region or have a connection with, because 165 communities in the state of Maine benefit from this. 55 are neutral and 39 see a slight to moderate reduction. This is really about looking at high poverty towns in rural Maine. Is where the money goes from. And we've done a lot of work, whether it's from our zip code analysis to our testimony to the working with the Mayor's Coalition of how we can really push this forward. And it does three fairly simple things. It looks at the regional adjustment is your cost of living in an area. And many places in the state actually had a negative cost of living, which impacted their ability to bring teachers up to the minimum standards. We actually go from a 1.09 to a 1.115, which will benefit us. The second component is looking at a kind of a metric of the wealth in your community or median income and making a 90-10 adjustment on what your mill rate contribution. Now, I wish it was more than 90-10. We really were hoping more to a 75-25, but we also, as a group, were in tune enough to realize that that wasn't going to fly, and that sometimes you know, a win is a win is a win, and then that doesn't mean that our work is done. And then the third piece is looking at the real, and there's some updates in other areas, but the third big piece for us is looking at, right now we receive a 0.2 factor for free and reduced lunch on page 2 of additional weight. And that's going to range across the state depending on a poverty level from 0.10 to a 0.35, and we're going to be like a 0.27 or 8 on that, which is significant. When we look at our overall demographics in the district over time, just wanted to highlight that right now we have our highest enrollment since 1920 at 2451. Our economics status is the highest that it's been at 64.01%. We have our highest enrollment in CTE programs of 512 taking courses. Our special education percentage of students is about 20%. Rate kind of in the range of where we've been the last several years. And then 18.15% of our student body is an ELL student, ML student. And so that's kind of who we are as a group. So before I get into the funding formula page, can I take any questions about what we've seen so far? Okay. So as we move into the 279, I have blocked these things out for you. And really, page 1 of a 279 is your enrollment versus how many staff members you have. So one of the things that I want to point out to you, and that's why I did give you guys a paper copy, is when you look at block 2, okay? Block 2 talks about your per pupil enrollments per all of the staff in your building. And you'll see that, again, the formula is designed to be the floor, like essential. When you look at staff ratios on this, we're at a 0.89, which means we're slightly above the floor. I was looking at several of the affluent communities yesterday as we were digging into data, and some of those communities that are high wealth, low poverty, their factor on teachers is like 0.75. That's significantly more staff per students in there. And that goes through several different categories and talks about where we are. If you're over a 1, it means that in the eyes of the state that you're probably a little bit light on something. And there's also positions that don't code necessarily the same way and meet all of the same factors that, you know, the state would have for something, and you might have something a little bit different of a tradition in a district. What you're trying to do on page 1 is really make sure I change the slide a little bit. Is you're really looking at the bottom number on the page, and the higher that bottom number goes, okay, the better it is for you on page 2, because you're building that number up to be multiplied by other factors. On page 2, you look at your subsidizable pupil counts. You look at your disadvantaged rates, and then you multiply your percentage of students that you have times your disadvantaged rates, and then you get a factor of by 0.15 times the number on the front of the screen to get additional subsidy. So you can see by just looking at a 0.15, if that section is changed to a 0.22, that's going to make the subsidy on that side significantly larger, which would be another benefit for us. In the green box, that is our students who are ML students, and they receive an additional weight of 0.525 times that number on the front to bring additional subsidy into the district. And then there are some other factors throughout the page where you're building for an operating allocation. The third page is where you have some costs that are expenditure driven. This is a major fundamental flaw in the formula. that based off what you spend, and then some of it on special education is you have to meet a maximum and they multiply it by something else and they come up with a rate. But we did see a large increase in special education funding, finally catching up a little bit, but still well behind affluent communities. They showed a graph the other day that when you look at state special education funding as a whole, the bottom 30, if you think of 33% of the schools that have the lowest poverty concentrations in it, they are getting about $3,500 per student in state aid for special education. The bottom 33% with the highest poverty get about $1,500 a student. And so the formula incentivizes, in a way, higher spending for communities that can afford it, and you get subsidized back. That's like in LD 2226, the other area that is going to get a lot of work. But that was a situation where even I came out and said, pump the brakes on that one. It's not ready for prime time, because again, so concerned that all the other changes that are really good for schools become the, like having something be perfect versus a step forward. We don't want that to be like an enemy of each other, and then everybody throws their hands up and nothing else gets done. So we've tried to, like, along the way say, no, that doesn't make sense. Let's get back to that in another year. Or make some further recommendations, but that's like the next piece that needs to be fixed. You look at your bus allocations on this page, you look at teacher retirement, transportation allocations, and you come up with your all combined allocation before you get to page 4. Page 4 is where they take all of those allocations behind and on the front page. And again, trying to build that number as much as you can. Then they multiply it by your property value of $4.17 billion in the community times an expected mill rate. And it says, as a community, you must pay this. That number went up a little bit, but we spend more than the minimum anyway, so it kind of just eats into your additional local. And then you get to this page where that number this year is about $2.7 million more than last year. On the final page, you're looking at your vocational subsidy, which is $3.66 million. Your educational service center, by being a service center, you get another $94,000. And so this year we're eclipsing $20 million from the state for all of those. And we're about 40% of our state funds are coming, 40% of our funding for education is coming from the state. Okay, so that's the start of the budget. Okay, now we put together a budget here that started with, okay, one, some really good news about subsidy in general. Knowing that we have salary and benefits that increase every year. Health insurance that we've put a 10% increase on. And then kind of got to a point where last spring, we were in a very different situation with budget. And we'd kind of written a memo, if you remember, at the end of it that said, hey, these would be some things that we'd like or need in the district. And we've never really been at a place where we've been able to address some of the needs. This year, I think we might be able to, or I'm at least going to recommend that we can, while hopefully keeping something very reasonable to the taxpayer. Because totally get that piece of where people are. Just go fill up today and you've seen a little bit of a change. The numbers I give you today, I'm going to tell you, this is probably, unless, Colin, I know, I'm pretty sure that we won't, this is where we see as like, we tried to build like the worst case scenario. We only hope to refine. Now, there may be some things one way or the other, and health insurance could come in at greater than 10%, and we'd have to readjust. And I still, there's a few supplies and things that I want to come into. But I want to look at where our cost drivers are in this budget. And the cost drivers in this budget, as you know, salaries and steps for teachers and staff. It's about $1.5 million. Health insurance, about $600,000. We have that friend of a payroll tax of 0.01 that will be coming on board at some point during 0.5, sorry, that will be coming on. That will be $150,000 in an additional payroll tax. Then we're going to be asking for some new programs and staff. Now, 2 of them you theoretically have already approved through the vocational center when Paulette put in, and it's included in our subsidy. And that's a new program for small engine repair and also digital media teacher. And that's figured into that amount. We've heard, and I'm just going to make a typo. I have a typo on this. That in the new positions, we know that we have almost 20% of our student body in ELL and needing some leadership in that department. And we would propose a half-time director and a half-time EL teacher at Biddeford High School. Additionally, I have another typo.
Jeremy, what?
Yep.
What building?
BHS.
Got it. Thank
The EL teacher would be at BPS, okay? And then we have a really large 5th grade coming up, and Scott is 100% going to need another teacher for 5th grade. We're also thinking that we have a lower 4th grade, so we actually would probably be, through a retirement, actually adding 2 at the middle school, and then the numbers go back down again, and 1 would swing back over. We're kind of constantly playing that game. We only had 168 kindergartners this year, so I worry about long-term population. Even though we have some new apartments going in places in the town, we don't tend to get a lot of kiddos from a lot of that. So we're always looking at that piece. And one of the things that we've always tried to do is when we need a teacher, we ask for it. And if we don't necessarily need one based off enrollments or we need to switch, we've always tried to do that. Because I think it's easier to ask when you can show what your needs are. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to get clarity on this. So you're asking on this. One of the positions is an ELL director that does that halftime, and then the other halftime teaches a
Yep.
BHS.
Yep.
Then a new ELL teacher for BPS.
That's my understanding. They were working on that today, and our proposals was changing throughout the day. You may see something that comes back a little bit different once we realign some things. But that Chris has been updating this as they made had their decisions today of, never really been in a position like this where I've been asking for a little bit more, so wasn't quite as prepared as I wanted to be.
Okay, so wait to ask more questions. is what you're
We're
saying.
getting there. Yeah, I think that
Okay.
we may come back in the next meeting and say, hey, we refined this and it might be this here and this here, but this is very close.
And the middle school teacher, Are you saying that's a ELL teacher?
No, that's a 5th grade teacher.
Just a 5th grade teacher?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
The next piece that we would be talking about would be a guidance counselor here at the high school. As 8th grade came over, we didn't expand that department, and kind of was something that we wanted to do. We just haven't been able to do. And that would be in there. A MTSS intervention teacher at Biddeford Primary School. That was something that was on the list last spring.
Sorry, Jeremy, what does that stand for? MTSS?
Multi-tiered.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Mandy explain that one, or Chris.
So what we're looking for, multi-tiered systems of support at the primary school, is an individual to oversee interventions, to provide academic supports in literacy and mathematics, to work with our educational technicians, in addition to a behavioral piece that we currently definitely do not have. So oversee academic interventions and behavioral interventions, pulling those teams together to wrap around services for our students that need it.
And then the other piece would be a math intervention teacher at BMS. One of the things we have seen over time is that we need greater growth in math. We need a lot of different things, but this is we really tried to go back to looking at what we would have added last year if there was an opportunity, and trying to follow that same path, because that's what our recommendations would have been last year. And then additionally, the small engine and the digital media piece. When you look at new program supplies, 186,000, a lot of that is for the 2 new programs at the COT, because you're starting from scratch, and obviously the digital media one is very computer intensive, that we would need to start up. And then out of district placements and special services, while there's increases in those lines, we've definitely seen an increase there, and a lot of that from a behavioral standpoint for kiddos. So I know this is a long list. So when you see all of these things and all of the things in the regular budget, I want to bring you to this slide that shows 13 years of increases that we've had here. And from an expenditure side of things for this budget, our expenditure increase would be 6.86%. That's the math adding up to that. When you look at the additional subsidy, this looks like a 3.875 increase to the taxpayer, up about $1.1 million. And it starts to make some progress towards one of these things. As you reflect upon your time in education, there's a time where I take those first several years as like a badge of honor of like, we did such a good job at the budget. And then as we dig into the work around the spending that occurs in education, part of our piece about LD 2229 is not necessarily all about tax savings. Some of it's about just offering programs to our kiddos. Now, I recognize that tax savings along the way, maybe it's a split, maybe it's a not, but we have to start taking some of the bites here at some of these programs and offerings, and this is a start for us, hoping that legislation will then catapult to another level for us. This budget, we are still working on adult education, and that usually fluctuates so very little that we wanted to get it right and not rush it onto the page. That's usually not much of an increase up or down. But this puts us at a situation that is much different than what we talked about March 5th of last year. So, Maureen?
Oh, sorry.
on the previous page with a small engine and the digital media, do any of those expenditures, will that be coming back to us? Are we going to get monies for that?
Not necessarily. It's part of the program expense is figured into your increased state subsidy. And then one of the things that Paulette and I have to go through is having a greater conversation about what federal funds or other grants that we may be able to peel out of that number. She has Perkins funds. We have a percentage that comes for new equipment. The challenge that happens at the vocational center is that anytime the welding teacher needs something, or if a new lift is needed in auto body, that's a little bit different than the supplies that other classroom teachers may have. So, one of the pieces that, I go back and so proud of the work that the staff and Paula has done over there is that when other people come to our facility, not only do they look at the facility and say, wow, but when you get people who walk down through the shop wing, and we've been able to use those funds to not just keep up, but to have some of the best equipment that there is and the most advanced, that's something we're really proud of. So whether this comes from that budget or the other, we need to get the program up and running because we have kids that just want to take the stuff. And we may have to do, depending on, we're really hopeful that we'll be able to find an auto body teacher because ours lost last year. We weren't able to hold it. And then if we're able to find someone, then we may have to use some of our money in this budget to do a few modifications of a classroom down there so that we can have double doors to make sure that for small engine, we could get a four-wheeler or a snowmobile in for that. The other piece that I didn't, that I want to make sure I mention in this budget is that we haven't necessarily forgotten capital, okay? Because keeping up on our school buildings is important. So what we know is that we will have next year the first partial payment of the BPS bond at $364,000. What I did is I looked at year number 2 of that bond, because your first year of a bond, you pay an interest payment, and the second year you'll pay an interest payment and a principal payment. And I looked at that number, and that number goes to $864. So I have a $500,000 capital line in the budget for this year, so that next year when the bond fully hits, you've kind of got that $500,000 built in. I also have another $200,000 of capital where we would bring money from the SMAC as a revenue in, like we've done the past couple of years, that would allow us to do some other work. I know BIS needs an intercom system, and we have pieces to go through that we'll sit down with Tim Marie and Karen and say, okay, here's Bill's list of things. Which ones do we think make sense for us to pick off this year to go through that funds? The one piece that I think it leaves us a little weak on in this budget is while we've able to have forethought about what the bond payment will be, our high school bond payment will go down a little bit. We'll probably in the next budget be saying, okay, I don't know that $200,000 is enough for capital. Where's another $300,000 going to come from? That will be something that we'll have to think about. But I think that this budget positions us in a way to make sure that I worry about that $500,000 payment coming on next year. And as we think about, where we need to get with the city council and these pieces, if let's say health insurance did come in a good way, that may be a situation where you say, hey, maybe we're not taking that full reduction down and you're putting more into capital to solve the problem for the next year. Because again, trying not to have wild swings is what we've always tried to do. And if you can, we just unfortunately got caught up with evaluation growth that created wild swings for us. And then if we have new funding formula we could be sitting here having some other really good conversations next year. I would take any questions.
Amy?
I guess I have more of an offer than a question, which is that having sat on that city council dais, I think one thing you do really well is explain where the money is going. And I think if we as a group are going to pitch something that feels new to city council, like the ELL support that we have here, I think we need to do a really good job of supporting Jeremy in conveying that information when he goes there. And as a person who does communications for a living, I would be very happy to help pitch that and package that in a way that conveys to the community what that need is. Because I think a lot of the people who have been here a long time don't really understand what that need might look like. And so I would be happy to do that. And I also think that the COT growth is just great. I don't think we need to worry about getting any kind of pushback on that. And if you have a bubble in a class, like, this doesn't look out of keeping to me at all in terms of new programs.
Michelle?
You mentioned the health insurance has 10% in it, increase. Last year, I remember we were very pleasantly surprised when our numbers came in. When was that, like mid-April that we found that out?
So we received an email that said by the end of the month, they talked what the bands were. They're like 14 to something. They suspect that they'll be lower. We tend to get the last week in March, we tend to get your rate won't be any lower than this and won't be any higher than this. And then the next Monday morning or a couple Monday after that, we come to an email that says it is this. That's usually first week in April. Allows us some time to make an adjustment or to think about what the impact would be. It usually comes in a way that by that first meeting in April that we have that information. And then I'll be at City Council on Tuesday night. We won't be back till voting in May-ish, where the calendar is. And it gives us a little bit of time to flex and help us hone in. We'll meet April 1st with City Council over at the COT. And hopefully the meeting will just have a little bit more spirit this time around. It just won't be such bad news. It's always more fun to talk about growth than subtraction. Yeah, that was off the top of my head. I believe that's what it is.
Marie?
I just wanted to say last year was just, we were all shell shocked. And it's nice to go into the budget season where there is a lot more positivity. And again, a lot of that, moving forward may continue to improve for our community. And again, thank you for the work you and your team have been doing on that. It's good to be in a different position. So thank you to all the work putting everything together.
Other questions or, yep, Emily?
Question for maybe Chris, I don't know, with the support that we see here and the potential new items here for ELL support, I'm wondering where that puts us. Last time we discussed ELL support, you mentioned that we were at risk of being sued, like Lewiston got sued. And I'm wondering where this would put us on the about to be sued to not about to be sued spectrum.
Thanks for the question, Emily. As Jeremy said, the numbers were a little bit of a moving target. You could kind of see his cursor in there and my cursor in there. Mandy and I decided that it would be a prudent use of a portion of our Title III funds, which are federal funds to support English language learners, to engage a consultant, the state's foremost expert on K-12 public education when it comes to educating MLs, someone who used to work for the Department of Education, now runs all multilingual programming for the South Portland schools. She came in, she met with all our billing principals, met with all our ML teachers and other stakeholders, and she did a comprehensive analysis of our program. She took every single kid in the district and figured out how much time they were receiving and whether or not that was in compliance with the service model that's recommended by the Department of Education, which not only is considered industry standard, but also gives us cloud cover against any kind of DOJ enforcement action. And she found some things that are going really well and where we're meeting that standard. And she found some areas that are deficited. And one of the areas that's deficited is BPS. And that's just because of a lack of staffing. We're not required as a matter of state or federal law to offer multilingual instruction for pre-K students, for example. But with that shift happening next year, you've got some pre-K classrooms in Lindsay's building going to BPS. You know, it takes more time to educate those kids. They tend to be what are called DLLs, dual language learners. They're still learning their native language, and then English on top of that. They're still learning to tie shoes. You know, it's just a different animal educating K kids and grade 1 kids. So what's in the budget is fully aligned with her recommendations. So she found some areas of strength, some areas of potential opportunity. She laid out what she thought would be a 3-year sort of implementation plan for us as a district. And so what Jeremy's brought forward to you this evening is fully aligned with her recommendations. We met with her Friday evening with the ML teachers to debrief on her report. We met with her at 9:30 this morning with our building principals to debrief on the report and make sure that we were all aligned with the recommendations and understood the why, and they had the opportunities to ask the questions. So I provided Jeremy earlier today with a link to the report. We can have that on a future agenda for discussion if you'd like. Also, this consultant's offered to come in and address any questions that you might have more directly. But the next agenda item is also about demographics, so I can talk a little bit more about that then. But I feel very comfortable that this is a much needed step in the right direction to come in line with Maine's service provision model for public education.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Mandy, did I miss anything?
Megan.
I have a question along those lines, but maybe don't go.
Stay.
Okay. That conversation that we had was about giving somebody like a department head stipend. And so I'm wondering if this director replaces that or
Yes.
if it's in conjunction with.
Yes. That was open the door a crack and see, is this enough to be able to get this work done? Is this a step in the right direction? And the answer to the first question is no. And the second half of that question is yes. And so, I mean, ideally, we'd be a full-time position as it is in other districts of our size and demographic composition. But again, I think this is a process to build through that and really assess what the needs are. And this isn't really just about assigning kids, looking at schedules, examining scores, but also supporting regular ed classrooms. I observed a math teacher the other day, kids speaking 6 different languages, had a debrief conference with his high school math teacher, 2nd year teacher, good teacher, thoughtful young man. Chris, I don't know what to do. I don't know how do I translate this? You know, it's one thing if it's a piece of prose and I can feed it into one of our systems and do a direct translation. But when I'm teaching algebra 1 and factorials, how do I make that accessible for a kid from Azerbaijan and another kid from China and another kid from Turkey and the other kid from Portugal?
Right. I'm in full support of adding as many resources as possible.
Yeah.
Amen.
I know that we have departments and department heads for, math, science, foreign language, the arts.
Vertical for the arts, yeah.
Right. And we have those in the high school. Do we have those in the middle school?
We have them, so we have department chairs, content-specific department chairs in the high school, but this board endorsed, Jeremy, 5 or 6 years ago, some vertical departments. So for example, art teachers on a PD day should be getting together, K-12, to do scope and sequence stuff. Physical education teachers, music teachers, and so we've had those in place. So what this board approved earlier in the year was an additional position along those lines. Same compensation, same kind of jobbish description and scope.
So I guess I'm just wondering if, there's a need for a director and then department head or what, however you're kind of saying this in terms of like this.
Well, a department
leader
chair in the high
versus-
school might have 10 people in the department. In the high school, that would be 3 next year. So really, I think a district-wide position makes a lot more sense. I mean, one of the things this consultant did for us, Megan, is say, well, in the intermediate school, you're using Spire and teacher-created activities. In the primary school, they're interested in the National Geographic curriculum for ML students. And in the middle school, it's all teacher-created content. And in the high school, it's pushing and support. And like we are just all over. I mean, that's not a criticism of teachers who are under-resourced, who come to
They're
me.
trying to build the plane.
Exactly. They are building the plane while it's in flight, having an expert come in, work with our curriculum committee on the board and say, we want to come back 27, 28 and recommend this K-12 curriculum would help eliminate some of the disparities in our delivery model and hopefully support regular ed teachers as well, who right now I think in a lot of cases are really struggling to support those kids because they just, if it's someone my age, I didn't take any classes in college on how to teach a multilingual learner.
So maybe the dream at some point is that in each building, there's somebody who could be a consultant to the core classes about how to adapt those for ML. That would be stipend.
It's a possible position. It's a possible machination of that. In other districts of similar demographic compositions, there are central office leadership positions. That's not the ask here. It's really just like, hey, we can't hire someone 0.5 with those qualifications to be a director. So that's why Jeremy's recommendation was 0.5 high school, just to bring down their numbers. They're about 1 to 74 kiddos right now. That would bring down their numbers to 1 to 66, which is better. And then also do that leadership work that we don't have the time or expertise to
I
lead.
was trying to get a sense of how big of a Band-Aid we're putting on, you know, the tear.
I think this is a significant and appropriate investment. I think we ought reassess after 6 months and see where things stand.
I think we're headed in the right direction, looking for continuity, consistency, and flow for those students to avoid all the loopholes. Like you said, it's this, it's this. I mean, it's been piecemealed, and I think having someone overseeing and helping to develop the continuity and the vertical articulation in curriculum for these kids is paramount into them coming on board and learning as much as they can, the best that they possibly can with something that has been developed sequentially. So I don't see it as a Band-Aid. I see it as we're in a treatment program, and we're going to continue to reassess and make amendments and transitions to what our needs are as we go. So amen to all of that. And I think that's just, going to be huge. And I think it hits so many other different things. It's not just the population. It impacts our scores that everybody's so hell-bent on all the time. And, I think this just is going to be such a benefit to those kids, when all of that comes around. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think we're making some good changes. And it's nice to be in a position budget-wise where we can do those kinds of things. And let's just continue with that good work and deal with the changing demographics of this community. Thank you.
Amy and then Emily.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of beating a dead horse, I guess I would question whether it's worth jumping right into a full-time person simply to draw a person with credentials that would have the juice to do what we need them to do, because there is a lot of building the plane while you fly it. And I wonder, we're already asking for 9 new positions. Like, what if we just made it 10 and had that be a full-time role? How hard would that ask be? I think it's a reasonable thing to actually take a bigger bite at this very long-standing apple.
Amy, I know you're new to the board and I'm not new to the district, but one thing you'll learn is I never talk about money. So you got to look that way if you want to talk.
And what I would caution you guys on is always taking a very measured approach, especially in growth.
Mm-hmm.
If you look just around us, like I get to do another one of these in about an hour from now, and I don't get to send exactly the same message. You've got many of your other service centers who are struggling right now around us, with some positions some districts talking about laying off like 70 plus people. I just always want to be cautious about our approach. I'm not one that wants to take it all right now. And yes, do I think we need that position? But, I think there just has to be some thought as we make those decisions, is that, these guys had to push me a little bit in this direction because I know it's needed. Because quite frankly, there are some other teaching positions out there that I would also like to look at that's not on this list. you know, I'm hoping that I can come back with some other things and maybe kind of talk about like to have the MTSS interventionist for Lindsay as well. There's just so many areas to cover, and so I just want us to be careful about that piece. The other piece, just as like it would be tough to hire just a half-time director, hiring just a half-time teacher would be equally as challenging for us. So we would maybe struggle there and have to reboot in a different direction.
Yeah, no, I hear you in that, and I understand. Like, you guys are the experts in this, but we're here to provide you like community feedback. I think we are at a different point. We're at a different time. I have not heard from a single parent who has said like we should provide less support, right? I haven't heard from a single taxpayer to tell me that. Everybody is saying, I see these kids who are under-resourced and I want them to be supported. And I think you will have support in doing that this particular year.
That is exactly what I was just going to say. So asked and answered.
I would say along the lines, just briefly as a last thought from me, along the lines of what Jeremy was saying, I think one of the benefits of having this analysis done by a neutral third is that it's not just about more bodies. It's about how we schedule our day. It's talking and meeting directly with principals with expertise that neither Mandy nor I nor Jeremy have, and saying, well, if you did this and this and this and this, this is your delta. And if your board adopts a curriculum that's comprehensive and supports your regular ed staff and your ML staff, this is your delta. And what we're seeing is that in some of our buildings, our kids are meeting the standard, they're hitting it out of the park, and in others they're not. And that's not a commentary on the quality of those staff. It's a function of some of those other things that can be a little bit nip tuck. But we need to also recognize that this enrollment is expected to grow a tiny little bit, but remain relatively stable. We're not going to see grievous losses of this population moving forwards. And I think this is really getting us to where we ought to be. I think it's right sized. I really do believe that. And appreciate the board's support.
Thank you. Any other questions or comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to multilingual enrollment projections for school year 2026-2027.
Well, this is a recurring gag at my expense because prior to COVID, every year I did a ML enrollment projection for the board, and every year I was wrong. With the best available data, at one point I used a study from the city from 2014, a demographics projection that was also wrong, so I felt a little better about that. So I gave up the prediction game during COVID, but I re-engaged with it this year because we had such a drastic change last year, and the question was really why, Chris? And the answer was primarily shutting down the Comfort Inn and Saco and the lion's share of those families landing in our community. But I think looking at historic demographic trends, our current housing stock, even right now, some of our pre-K enrollments that we've opened up within the last week, I anticipate our ML population to be stable next year. The highest growth, and that's high is a relative term, is expected to be at Biddeford High School with, I think, about a 7% increase or something along those lines. But, you know, investing in this staff, investing in curriculum, I think of it as a little bit of like deferred maintenance, right? Like if you don't fix your roof now and it keeps leaking, it gets worse, it's more expensive to fix later. That if we continue to underserve kids, particularly BPS, then when they go to BIS, they're just working that much harder to try and get them caught up. And then it takes them longer to exit, so that by the time they get to the middle school and the high school, we're serving them for 2 blocks instead of 1, which requires more staff. And so it's this compounding deficit. So I think that's why we're focusing a lot of our investments at the younger age so that we can increase our exit rate. But I think it's fair to say that we are a very transient community. About half the kids who start with us in K finish with us in grade 12. And our ML population is a particularly transient subgroup. So I think it's reasonable to think that there could be a delta of plus or minus 10% in my projection for next year. But I don't think it's going to be a grievous change. You know, it's not going to be a 25% change like it was last year.
Questions? Comments? Marie.
I just want to make a comment about you talking about the snowball effect and why we're concentrating everything at the lower end. but it's not just within the school system. It's what happens when they leave us.
Right.
As young adults. And so it's important, that we take this very seriously and continue to do what we can to prep all our kids for, their potential successful, futures. And not just to look at it from a school vantage point, but a community vantage point. So thank you for all that.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Takes us to item C, first reading of draft school calendar for school year 2026, 2027.
All right, so this is your draft calendar for you guys to look over. We usually take 2 readings on this. This is one of those tougher calendars because you have Labor Day that is the last possible day that it can be. So our first kind of piece on this is that we would bring staff back the last week in August for 3 days of a workshop. And then we would go 4 days the next week, still having the Friday off. So that there's the long weekend. Workshop day in October, which is the shared workshop day from every vocational center across the state. So we take that in common. Didn't quite get the 2 full weeks on this calendar in at Christmas time, which again was wonderful, and got some positive comments about that. But it really, as you start looking at the last date of the end of the school year, it starts pushing it back a little bit too far. And, again, I think that same piece of not going past that holiday in June is something that we need to try to avoid. In any calendar that we build. So I'd ask you guys to look through this, feel free to count days, look at some things, and then we would come back with any feedback for another draft at the next meeting. Megan?
I already have a quick question.
Yep.
In March, you have the student out day being March 24th.
Yep.
Why a Wednesday? Why in the middle of the week?
Well,
You have 2 Mondays for everybody when you do that.
I understand that. We have a late extended time that day, so it gives us a little bit more time. It helps us stay a little bit more consistent because some of our other districts that we partner with at the vocational center take another early release on that day. So it doesn't create as much as an off day. We're at our max right now with this calendar with 5 dissimilar days with the vocational center. And so by having it on that day, they're already having a shortened day, which shortens that classes. And we're
It
trying.
doesn't count against you then as a day off.
It
from
still
where they
it
are?
still counts against us, but then if we take that to a Friday, now the kiddos at the vocational center have a messed up Wednesday because of the other schools having the early release, and then the Fridays messed up as well for those kiddos because there'd be no school. It's hard when TA and the others don't have when we have not having the same early release schedule is difficult. You can speak to it. You're there on those days that early release days are pretty tough over there just in general. And then, one of the things that sometimes is a little bit different over there is even though another school has an early release, a lot of the kiddos do come, which is pretty nice, but it messes with our transportation aspect in other communities very differently.
Any other questions? Suppose we'll look for a motion to pass the first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Takes us to a series of second readings, beginning with school committee member freedom of access training.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Certification of completion of freedom of access training.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Second readings for policies to revise, remote participation in school board meetings.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Rules of order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Also unanimous. Pregnant students.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. And questioning and searches of students. Administrative procedure.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Those were all moved by Amy and seconded by Marie. Thank you. Takes us to public participation, 3-minute limit. Seeing none, any communication from school committee members? Megan?
I just wanted to acknowledge that last night at the winter sports banquet, Shelley Kane was acknowledged for all of her hard work with all the students at BHS and all the support that she does, and the team moms and the volunteerisms, and she was there taking pictures at the banquet at the time, so like someone else had to grab the camera to be able to do that. But it's just another example of how lucky we are to have Shelley, you know, as an employee, but also as a parent in our community. So congratulations, Shelley, very well deserved.
Marie?
I had the pleasure of reading to second graders yesterday or Monday at the primary school. Had a blast. It took me back to my roots when I first started. They're just so cute. And it was just a great experience. So anyone who has a chance to do that, I urge you to do it. They're just a bundle of joy to watch and interact with. So urge people to get out, give a half hour, read to some kiddos, ask some questions about the book. And, you know, with little ones, you're going to get a whole heck of a lot more. But it was great.
Thank you. On a similar vein, I had a chance to visit Mrs. Palladino's second grade class and was reading Fox and Socks to them last Friday. It was a tough one, tongue twister. They picked it out, was not my choice. And I wanted to thank their Mrs. Palladino and her class for that. It was a great time to get to answer some questions about being mayor and have listened to some of their goals and some of their needs in Biddeford. They identified the primary school playground as one of their favorite places in Biddeford, so thank you for the investment there. And they are excited to see some of what the recreation bond in the city does. They would love to see a splash pad, more playgrounds. So I'll be conveying that message at our next city council meeting, but thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? That is unanimous. Meeting adjourned.